Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Everybody sing!
Oh, give me a home where my cattle can roam for free while others must pay. Where now all that's heard are encouraging words for militias arriving today. Home, home on the range, where Fox News and Hannity play, where the right wing is heard and the gun nuts are stirred, getting crazier each broadcast day. Now thanks to the right, public land is a blight. You can really just take it by force. We're loaded and locked. I'm a rancher half-cocked. My rights, they exceed those of yours. Now sometimes at night, when the cable glows bright, I think about the wild creatures too. Ooh. But that's gone in a burst. Private sector is first. Take your laws and your rules and screw you.
Oh, yeah! Home, home on the range,
where Fox News and Hannity play, where the right wing is heard and the gun nuts are stirred, getting crazier each broadcast day. Look at that moon. I think the feds have something to do with that moon.
Oh, of course they did. The feds had something to do with that moon. The feds. All right, welcome to the Friday edition of the Randi Rhodes Show. As Randy would say, it's Friday, you bastards! Yeah, I'm not bouncing the boobies because only Randy can bounce the boobies. Okay, I can probably bounce along with the best of them, but that's Randy's thing. So next Friday, Randy will bounce the boobies with you. Okay, but welcome to it, the Randi Rhodes Show. I'm Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com. And that little gem that we opened today's show with came courtesy of a comic, a cartoonist named Mark Fiore. He's at markfiore.com. And, these days it's not enough to just be like a cartoonist. Now you got to make videos and sing, too. And maybe he should just stick to making the videos and let someone else do the singing. That was kind of painful.
Mark's a very nice guy. He's a good cartoonist.
He's a great cartoonist.
Oh, yeah, he's a great cartoonist. But, yeah, his singing...
It sounds like what Clive Bundy would sound like if he sang. So, okay.
He was accurate.
He was accurate. And it gave me a giggle or two. And that's good, because I think today we're going to need some giggles. Or at least I will. Look, I am... today's really bittersweet for me because it is my final day filling in for Randi Rhodes. And I've been honored to do this for the last 4.5 years. Actually, the first time I ever guest hosted Randi's show was on my 50th birthday. She and I had occasion to talk on the phone. We had a great conversation. And Randi has always been very supportive. And, it's funny because people think that, like, we're great friends. Actually, I've only met Richie and I have only met in person once, and it was at a radio convention thing in New York. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago or more. Maybe it was before I ever did her show. I'm not sure. But, no, it was after I started, now that I'm thinking about it. There's a little video I put together, by the way, of that meeting. I put it up on YouTube. I called it something like When Progressive Talk Hosts Collide, because there was Tom Hartman, there was Alan Colmes, there was, do you remember Jack Rice? Jack Rice was there, Stephanie Miller, Randi, me, and some of the, the significant others were there too. Howard makes a cameo. So it's kind of cool, and I actually posted it on the Randi Rhodes message board today. I started a new topic, and then, of course, afterwards I saw someone already had a similar topic. So you guys might want to combine the two. But it was something like, pay tribute to Randi, give her thanks, because look, I want her to have something to take with her. I'm sure she's already got thousands and thousands and thousands of emails. But so I started a little topic on the Randi Rhodes message board at randyrhodes.com. With my little tribute. I've got an email list, over at radioornot.com, and I sent something out to the people on my list on Sunday, just paying tribute to her. So I copied and pasted it in there, and then embedded the video that I put. It's like a 30-second long video of the one and only time we met. But see, that's the thing. Even though I've only met Randi in person once, I do feel like she's a dear, dear friend. And as I said in that email, in that post, she's, you might not think that modest is the word to describe Randi, but it really is. She does things to help others quietly. She doesn't brag about those things. She has come through for me, certainly on more than one occasion, and in a big way. Even aside from giving me the honor, the privilege of sitting at her microphone. For a radio host, somebody especially like Randi, who has built this following, who has earned the respect and the devotion of fans over the course of many years, you guys, the audience, you are the most precious thing to her. And when you have somebody, filling in for you, you want to know that you can trust that person to not abuse the privilege, as it were, not to offend your listeners. And I'll tell you something, Randi, we differ on a few things, not many things. We're pretty closely aligned in our attitudes, in our ideology. But then sometimes, we differ. We disagree on certain things. And never once in 4.5 years has she ever told me what to say, what not to say, what topics to cover or to stay away from. She has given me free rein. And I think that's because, she trusted me. And I got to tell you, that trust is... I'm so honored by it. I want to repay the favor somehow, and someday I think I will. Randi helped me out once in a big, big way, and it's between the two of us. I'm not going to go into details, but when I thanked her profusely, she said, "Look, don't worry about it." She said, when you have it, you give it. When you need it, you take it. And that's the way she is, And I think, look, I don't know for sure this week. I know Randi had family plans, and it was a big deal to get, Howard's kids and Jessica and the whole family together. But knowing that she only had a month left, she could have said, you know what, that week that we already decided you're going to fill in, I'm going to be there. I really think part of the decision was, she knew that losing this gig is going to impact me, and she cares about other people, and I think it comes through. It comes through with everything she does. So, we got a lot of territory to cover today. We got some great guests lined up. But I think in the third hour, I would like to be able to, let you guys call in. Well, you can call in any time, of course, 866-87-RANDI. But in the third hour, I really want to take some time and maybe just, talk about some of our favorite memories of the Randi Rhodes Show. So if you have any story, or maybe the first time you heard Randi, or something that, you want to share, bring it. Today's a good day to do that. Because you know what? I think when Randi's here, and I don't know, Sean, you work with her in the studio every day. I never have.
Yep.
I think she gets a little humble. I think when people call and he prays on her, sometimes she'll move it along. And I think it's because, like a lot of radio people, we got into radio, I think, because you can be anonymous. You can
some degree,
to some degree, right? You can talk on the radio, but then when you go out, you're not immediately recognizable. I know Randi is shy. I happen to be shy when I meet people in person, so I think she gets a little. When people are heaping praise on you, although it feels good, it's like, what do you say? Thank you.
She's a great person. I have had an absolute blast working with her for most of the last 4 years. So it's awesome. So we can do that in the third hour.
We'll do that in the third hour.
If there's any questions that you guys have that you want to ask about, behind the scenes stuff,
today's the day to do it.
Time to do it.
Right. So we've left the third hour open for that. We'll have some fun and share some memories and pay tribute to the goddess of radio. All right. But let me tell you what's coming up. This week, if you had to look back on the week just gone by, right, that's ending today, I think the two biggest stories are the rearing the ugly head of racism. My goodness, for years now we've dealt with the dog whistles, right? The dog whistle racism coming from Fox News and right-wing hate talk radio and Republican politicians, frankly, right? But it seems like in the last couple of weeks, the dog whistle has gone away, and it's just been blatant, in your face, full-on, no-holds-barred racism, right? And so one person that I love talking to, I've gotten to interview him many times over the years, and he's always thought-provoking and insightful. His name is Tim Wise, and he's known as an anti-racist speaker, author, and activist. Tim Wise will join us in just in the next segment, in the segment after the bottom of the hour, to talk about what the hell is going on in racist America in 2014. The other big story, of course, is the Great Divide, right? A divided America, the haves and the have-nots, the 1% and the 99%, right? Now, today we got some good economic news. The jobs report: 288,000 jobs added in March. I'm sorry, in April, and the unemployment rate has now fallen to its lowest point since September 2008, when when everything went bad, right? When everything crashed, 6.3%. That's good news. But the bad news is we still have the most, probably the biggest divide between the haves and the have-nots in the industrialized world. I mean, we really are becoming not only an oligarchy and plutocracy headed towards fascism, but really like a third world country, right? Where you got the very, very wealthy and everybody else who's just struggling and scraping to get by. So one of my favorite journalists, writers on that subject, David K. Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, by the way, reporter, has a new book out, and it's coincidentally called Divided: The Perils of Our Growing Inequality, and he'll join us in the next hour. So those two great guests, and the phone lines are open at 866-87-RANDY, 866-877-2634. Nicole Sandler in for Randi Rhodes.
One of the Supreme Court justices, she told him just knock it in.
That's right.
Sitting up there pretending that now racism don't exist.
And there's Clarence Thomas.
Oh, y'all, brother. Oh, brother. You said that, I did.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to understand what he said there, so we'll get to it in a second. Welcome back to the Randi Rhodes Show. I'm Nicole Sandler, in for Randi one last time today. And that was Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson of South Carolina on a radio show last weekend. It was actually the New Nation of Islam radio show. Now, I'm actually surprised the right-wing crazies haven't gone nuts over the fact that this congressman appeared on the New Nation of Islam radio show. But instead, they were all up in arms over what Benny Thompson said. And you couldn't hear it clearly there because it broke up.
He's from Mississippi.
Oh, he's from Mississippi. I'm sorry. He is from Mississippi. I knew that. Thank you for the correction. And so you couldn't really hear it, but they got it. What Benny Thompson said is that he thought Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, is an Uncle Tom. Well, oh boy, they went nuts. And so yesterday, Dana Bash of CNN caught up with Congressman Thompson in the halls of Congress.
Clarence Thomas saying that he was an Uncle Tom. What did you mean by that?
Well, if you look at his decisions on the court, they have been adverse to the minority community, and the people I represent have a real issue with an African American not being sensitive to those issues.
Calling him an Uncle Tom, though, isn't that a racially charged term?
For some it is, but to others it's the truth.
Because, looking at that and hearing that kind of language, that certainly wouldn't be, appropriate if it was coming from somebody who was white.
But I'm black.
So it makes it okay?
Well, I mean, you asked me the question, and I'm giving you the response. The people that I represent, for the most part, have a real issue with those decisions. Voter ID, affirmative action, the Affordable Care Act. All those issues are very important. And for someone in the court who's African American and not sensitive to that is a real problem.
It is a real problem. And, you know, the term Uncle Tom, I guess, is a racially charged term. But you know what I say? If the shoe fits, you know, you can go to urbandictionary.com. And the Urban Dictionary definition of Uncle Tom is a black man who will do anything to stay in good standing with the white man, including betray his own people. And I would say I believe that that's Clarence Thomas. I think he is an abomination of a Supreme Court justice. Horrible. Unqualified and just undignified on the bench. Just his record of lying, of holding back information on the financial disclosure forms that they're supposed to fill out, and deciding to just exclude the six-figure salary his wife got for being a lobbyist working against the Affordable Care Act. A blatant conflict of interest there, but did Justice Clarence Thomas recuse himself from the case, hearing the challenge to the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act? No, because that would have been the right thing to do, right? On every front, this man is an abomination. But during that radio show, Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi said some other things, including he said the treatment of this president, the way the Republicans have treated him, is also due to racism.
You believe that some of the opposition, maybe even much of the opposition to the president, is because of the color of his skin?
I've been here a long time, and I've seen a lot of issues come before Congress. I've never seen the venom put forth on another president like I've seen with this president, and that's my opinion.
And are there specific things that people have said that are racially tinged that make you say that, or you think it's just you're just reading the tea leaves of what's going on?
I've seen quite a few State of the Union messages. I've never heard a president called a liar in a State of the Union message.
Do you think, Congressman Wilson, that was race-based?
Well, no. I've never heard it before. I mean, it was a stupid statement, but it has no real bearing there.
Right, and they wouldn't do that, I'm sorry, to even Bill Clinton. Oh, and as for Mitch McConnell?
Mitch McConnell saying that his comments were racist.
Well, it had nothing to do with that. The comments were insensitive. To say to a president that you're going to oppose anything that he puts up is just totally...
But you think it was race-based?
Well, I've never heard it said to any other president.
That's right. You know, just look at how this president has been treated by, members of Congress who happen to be Republicans. They didn't treat Bill Clinton like that. Have you ever seen, this kind of treatment of a president in history? I don't think so. We're going to talk about race with Tim Wise. Coming up next. If you've never heard Tim Wise speak on race, you need to listen. Nicole for Randy. We'll be right back.
There's more cholera in America than there is racism.
Racism is over!
All right. So Jon Stewart said that facetiously, and Ann Coulter, I guess she was serious, right? More cholera in America than there is racism. Yeah, sure. But, that's the opposite world in which they live over at Fox. Welcome back to the Randi Rhodes Show, the Friday edition. I'm Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com. As always, honored to be in for Randy today. And honored to speak with our next guest. I'll tell you, every time I speak with Tim Wise, I think I learned something, and my eyes are opened a little wider. Tim Wise is a speaker, an author, an activist on racism. He's an anti-racist speaker, author, activist with 7 books to his credit, including White Like Me, Reflections on Race from a Privileged Son, and like I said, 6 others. And Tim, thank you so much for joining me today on the Randi Rhodes Show.
Thanks for having me.
What a week this has been, or I should say 2 weeks. I mean, really, have you seen such blatant in-your-face, forget the dog whistles and stuff, just blatant in-your-face, no-holds-barred racism in a long time?
Probably not since the height of the Tea Party rallies in 2009,
right.
I guess. But I mean, in other respects, it's sort of par for the course. These kinds of overt examples of racist bigotry bubble up from time to time. What I think is still very disturbing, though, is that, once again, we as a country apparently are capable, and I guess this is good news, but we're capable of getting really bent out of shape at the expression of overt and obvious racist ignorance, but we ignore the day-to-day stuff. We ignored Donald Sterling for years.
Right.
Here's a guy with a history of racist behavior, not just words, but actual treatment, the blatant discrimination against black and Latino renters in his slumlord apartments that he had in and around Los Angeles. He paid the biggest fine in the history of any housing discrimination case ever brought by the Justice Department. But I guess breaking the Fair Housing Act of 1968 allows you to remain an NBA owner in good standing. It's only when you insult Magic Johnson and other, not so poor and more powerful black folks that all of a sudden, it becomes a financial liability. And so they decide to take action. Now, the action they took was appropriate, but it's also many, many years overdue. And I think it just goes to show that, we're as a nation, we're very hypocritical about racism. We want to put on a very nice face. And so when someone says something really blatant, we all go, oh, my God, that's terrible. That's not the America that we're in. And yet, sadly, it is the America that we're in. It's just that most people, have a filter that apparently Donald Sterling lacks.
Right. Well, but, here's the thing. I agree with everything you said, Tim, except here's what because there was a recording, because we got to hear him say those horrible things. I mean, unimaginable, you can't even conceive that someone would actually say that to another person. Like, you can sleep with them, just don't bring them to my games, don't take pictures with them and post them online. Really? Because that audio was played all over the place, and now the average person who had never heard of Donald Sterling before went, oh my God, did you hear that tape? Where even if we had seen it in writing, it would have been probably not as shocking.
Well, I think that's probably true, but I think, there are also a lot of other times that we've been able to catch discriminatory behavior on tape. There's that TV show, What Would You Do, and it's a relatively popular show. They've actually done quite a few good segments about racism where they're pretty blatant examples of disparate treatment of people of color relative to whites. But, none of that stuff becomes a media sensation, right. Even though I guess it gets pretty good ratings. We don't actually sort of lose a lot of sleep over that. It doesn't become a huge story when black folks are, they set up one example I remember where a black kid was, quote unquote, stealing a bike. Of course, it was really an actor. And then they had another part of the segment where it was a white female.
And the people helped her do it, right? People were I saw that.
Steal the bike, right? And you'd think, granted, it's a news show that gets a decent amount of coverage, but it doesn't get anywhere near this. And I think it's more the fact that it's this celebrity component. It's here's a white guy who makes millions and millions of dollars off disproportionately the labor of black men, saying these things about black men, which does make it especially, I guess, ironic and pathetic and incredibly insulting. But I just wish that we as a country would be as exorcised and as upset about these less blatant. And the NBA, look, the NBA knew about Donald Sterling's housing discrimination stuff several years back, a decade ago. There's no way they couldn't have. Elgin Baylor knew about it. Other folks in the NBA knew about it, and they didn't take action. So even if we can say, well, the reason it didn't become a media firestorm when he did that stuff against black and Latino renters was because there was no tape, the NBA certainly could have done something because he's violating the Fair Housing Act. You would think that would probably run afoul of the NFL sort of bylaws, and NBA bylaws about what the league is going to stand for.
Right. And then, of course, let's look at the other big story in the last couple of weeks. We got the Cliven Bundy thing, which, he was the poster boy on the Sean Hannity show. They deified him. Look, we're standing up for your freedom by breaking the law and pulling guns on federal agents. But, this guy is shown. And then he said, then there's tape of, first came a report that Cliven Bundy went on a racist tirade. And, boy, the post initially, like on Facebook and Twitter, from all the defenders of him were like, yeah, well, I don't believe you. Let me see it. And then the tape came out. Let me tell you what I know about the Negro. And now, all of a sudden, there's outrage. Again, this is people are finally verbalizing this stuff where for a couple of years, it's been a lot of dog whistles. We've heard a lot of, the inner city lazy people who can't find work, those kind of things. Let me ask you my theory, because I wonder, great, here's Donald Sterling. He's being banned for life from the NBA and all that good. Glad, too late, but glad it's finally happening. But then there's people on TV and on radio every day who say horribly racist things. I look at Rush Limbaugh. I look at Glenn Beck. I look at, all the people on the Fox so-called news channel and wonder, if the average racist person sitting at home who's been, kind of hiding it under the blanket, kind of, and now they hear all these people on the public airwaves doing it, and are they emboldened by that? There's no consequences being paid by any of these people.
Well, I'm quite sure they are, but I think really, it does again go to show that, you can do dog whistle stuff, or you can beat around the bush, but allude very clearly to black folks, as Paul Ryan did when he talked about, this so-called inner city work ethic,
right,
and swore he wasn't thinking about black people, which is just not credible. I mean,
Nope.
It's just not credible. Or you can say things that are incredibly blatant. And I think one thing we can say about our country, and this is good, I don't mean to sound cynical, but is that, we've gotten to the point where overt expressions of bigotry are pretty much unacceptable vis-a-vis peoples of color, and that's a good thing, I suppose. It certainly wasn't the case 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So, pat on the back for the U.S. We've made that much progress. But the problem is that those dog whistles are still denied. And look, think about Cliven Bundy. I mean, here's a guy whose fundamental statement, right, which was, social welfare programs have basically made blacks worse off than slavery. As absurd as that is, as absurd and ridiculous as it is, that is one of the fundamentally most common things you hear mainstream conservatives say all the time. I mean, they make the same argument. They actually, I was taping a show earlier today on CNN, and Jamel Bowie was on, the author, and he was talking about, last year, I think it was, he mentioned that there was this documentary film that did very well among conservative audiences called Runaway Slave. And this was a film that basically paints the entirety of the social welfare state as a plantation created by liberals to essentially enslave black people.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea that, the government is worse now for blacks than it was when it literally allowed them to be owned as property. And as I mentioned on the show this morning, it's fundamentally, obviously, ignorant of history, but it's also ignorant of the present, because currently, and I ask my audiences this on the road all the time, I ask them, what percentage of African-American adults do you believe receive cash assistance from the government on a monthly basis? And usually the answers will be 10%, 20%, 30%. Many people even say, as many as half. The actual answer is 1.2%. There are 350,000 approximately black adults in this country who are receiving cash, quote-unquote, welfare. That's out of 28.5 million black adults in all. 350,000 on that particular program that folks normally think of when they think of quote-unquote welfare. So how in the world can we not only make this ignorant comparison with the actual ownership of human beings and all that entails, when only an infinitesimal percentage of people even receive this so-called benefit? So this is ignorant both of history and the current reality, but sadly we have allowed this kind of tripe to be said, not by the Cliven Bundys of the world, because doddering old ranchers are really not our problem in this country, but by people who actually have significant influence over the national narrative and the debate about social programs, about taxation, about spending, about what government does and doesn't do.
You're so right, and it's not only the Cliven Bundys, and I think again those kind of people who sit watching Fox all day get it from Republican members of Congress. My former Congressman Alan West has said it. That it has likened it to slavery. Sarah Palin has. Because they just repeat those talking points that they're given by Heritage Foundation or Tea Party Express or you name it, and it keeps going. So Tim. Again, we're speaking with Tim Wise. He's an anti-racist speaker, author, activist, 7 books. You can find his website, timwise.org. Follow him on Twitter, @TimJacobWise. Yesterday there was an uproar because somebody found a tape of a radio show that Congressman Benny Thompson of Mississippi did over the weekend, in which he said he said Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, is an Uncle Tom. And he also said that the reason the Republicans treat Barack Obama so badly is because he's black. I believe that. There's a black man in the White House, and they can't handle it. And he also said Mitch McConnell is racist. Well, oh, my goodness. Heads are exploding all over, the Republican halls of Congress. But did he say anything wrong?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I don't think as a white person it's really for me to chime in or for any white person to really get involved in whether or not it's right to call a black person an Uncle Tom. To me, that's a term that black folks got to decide if they're going to use that.
And this is an African-American congressman.
Right, and he is. So that I think is, really for him to decide. I will say this. I mean, I think one thing we have to understand is whether or not it's a good idea to, as Jamel Bowie said on the show this morning when we were taping for CNN, to police the borders of blackness, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. The one thing that I said, and I'd say again, is, when you spend your entire judicial career ruling against over and over again the successes of the civil rights struggle, when you vote to weaken the Voting Rights Act, one of the greatest pieces of legislation in this country's history, when you do that over and again, when you vote to eliminate or severely restrict the very kinds of affirmative action programs that you yourself, meaning Clarence Thomas, acknowledge you benefited from, you really can't be shocked and appalled and surprised when other black folks, not just Benny Thompson, but his constituents, most of them African American, who feel that way about you. It doesn't mean the term is the one that maybe is the best to use. Again, I would not use that as a white person against a black person, no matter how much I disagreed with them. But I think that we have to understand that this guy has a history of voting in ways that the overwhelming majority of black folks in the entirety of the civil rights community, going back 50 years, find appalling. As far as the statement about opposition to Obama being entirely about race. I've never said it quite that way. My argument has always been, however, that over the last 40 years, any attempt to do anything vis-a-vis government, whether it's health care, whether it's any type of jobs initiative or economic stimulus, the government doing anything to help average everyday folks has been increasingly rejected by particularly white Americans, and the direct relationship between that and the racialization of who they think the beneficiaries are is the primary reason why that opposition has grown. 80 years ago, 70 years ago, 60 years ago, big government was very popular with white people. Of course, back then, pretty much the only people who could benefit from big government and jobs programs and all of those things were white. As soon as people of color began to gain access to the programs that white folks had already had access to since the 30s, that's when all of a sudden we discovered our inner libertarian and decided that we were against government. So I think it's deeper than the president being black. I think there is this increasing racialization of social policy. And so any president, but particularly a black president, who seeks to do something like a health care reform or like the stimulus bill or any of those things is going to be race-baited in a way that a white president would not. We know, for instance, Bill Clinton proposed health care reform that was at least as thoroughgoing as the one we ended up with. And prior to the election of Barack Obama, there was an interesting survey where they actually sat down white voters and showed them, not telling them whose plan it was. They showed a group of white voters this health care plan, like a 10-point plan, and it was Obama's plan. But they told them it was Bill Clinton's plan, from 1993. And overwhelmingly, the white folks supported this plan, like 2-1. Then a group that was demographically identical to that first group, so they would have very similar views ideologically, very same party affiliation, similar education, were shown the same 10-point plan, and they were told it was Obama's plan, and overwhelmingly 2-1 they rejected it, right? So the very same plan looked at by white folks who were demographically, ideologically similar, and yet they come to two totally different positions based on who the president is. I would suggest that that is because of the presumption, which the right has stoked for many years, that, social policy disproportionately helps black people, and that's what's going to happen if it's a black guy doing it, right? So it's the combination of him being a person of color, but also the way that social programs of any kind have been so intensely racialized over the last 40 to 50 years in general.
Right. No, I hear you. It's also an issue of, changing demographics. Soon, white people are going to be the minority in this country, and this freaks them out. The good news is I think a lot of this is generational, and many of those, Clive and Bundys and Donald Sterlings are going to die soon. And, I read, Tim Wise, your Facebook page and how you proudly write about your kids and your fourth grader who got into a great discussion with you about the meaning of Sojourner Truth's, famous essay.
That was the sixth grader.
Oh, that was a sixth grader. Still, that's pretty damn cool. I think kids get it. And so the outlook, at least in that case, is kind of rosy. Tim, I got to run. It is always a pleasure talking with you. Tim Wise, find him at timwise.org. Read this guy's work. It's great. Thank you so much, Tim.
All right. Thanks, Nicole.
Bye-bye. All right, we'll take a break. Come back with your calls on The Randi Rhodes Show. I'm Nicole Sandler. We'll be right back. Randy will be back on Monday for the final 2 weeks. So this is going to be must-hear radio. I know I'll be glued to the radio for the hours that she's on. Well, as I usually am listening, but yeah. All right, Randy back here Monday. Nicole Sandler today in for Randy, and let's go to the phones. Bill. Bill in St. Petersburg, Florida, listening online. Hi.
Hello. Hi, Nicole. How you doing?
Doing okay.
That's excellent. I just wanted to respond to the Clarence Thomas where that he was called an Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
And I had a response to you earlier. You said you guys couldn't speak on it, not being black, but I can because I am.
Okay.
It's a very old reference.
Oh, of course. Right.
I think it was mentioned in Uncle Tom's Cabin, and of course, it's in the black community. It literally is a label for somebody who is preferential to the white superclass.
Right. It is a black person who is either is or is perceived as doing anything, to mollify the white man, often at the expense of his fellow African Americans, right? I mean, that's how I take it. And I'll tell you, look, I wouldn't say it, but there is an African American congressman who did, and I think it was perfectly okay. You?
For a congressman, no. Reason being in the public, it's like dancing through a minefield. It's going to blow up all over the place. People are going to say, "Oh, he's a public figure."
Yeah, but you know what? I hear people in the media say more heinous things on a daily basis, and that's okay. It's okay for Glenn Beck to say Barack Obama is a racist. He has a deep-seated hatred for white people. But this congressman can't point out that the only African American sitting on the Supreme Court has done things that are horrible for his fellow African Americans. Just a real disconnect there. Bill, I'm sorry, we're up against the clock and I got to run, but thank you for the call. Nicole for Randy, more of your calls after the break.